Welcome to Lost Boys to Found Fathers. I'm Will Haycox. Joining me is my co-host Gabe O'Sullivan. We're men who suffer the loss of a child, and through that we want to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to those who listen to this podcast. What's up, Gabe?
Hey, buddy. So last episode we talked about, we're in this series, we're talking about leading our children well. This is episode 3. Last episode we talked about being completely gentle and humble, be patient, bearing with one another in love. That was from Ephesians 4:2. So definitely go back and check that out. Hopefully there's some good tidbits about how we can lead our kids well by being humble and gentle, patient, and loving with them. And today we're going to talk about Ephesians 6:4. So what does that say? And let's get into this and how this can help us to lead our kids well.
Yeah, I'm going to read the ESV translation, and I think we're going to explore a couple other translations as we discuss this, but I'll start with ESV. So it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord."
So this is how I've seen this play out in my life when I've messed this up, okay? I'll use my middle child as an example, and I understand that there are times, and I've seen it, where I have perhaps given him too many instructions at once. Okay, this is just a simple example. Certainly other examples where I might have been like, hey, go do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do that. And he gets number 1 and number 4, but he forgot to do number 2 and 3, right? And then I might come at him and be like, bro, why didn't you do number 2 and number 3? And then he's like, well, I forgot. And then I might be like, well, how'd you forget? It was simple instructions, right? And so, and then that provokes him to this state of exasperation with man, give me a break. I forgot. It's almost like, I think this verse is reminding us to not put unnecessary demands on our kids that are going to lead them to blow in a gasket. Because if they blow a gasket, we might do the same thing. And so it was this verse is just a really great reminder of let's remember that our kids are kids. We kind of touched on that in the last episode. Just as if though, if you're trying to teach, Bonnie, right? She's 2 and
She's almost 3.
Yeah, almost 3, right? 2 and 7/8. Okay, she's right there, whatever, 11/12. More than that even. And so, if you come at Bonnie and she's trying to learn the word hippopotamus, right? And she's like, hippopotamus? What was that, Mr. Deeds or whatever? And you're just like, Bonnie, enunciate. Get your alliteration correct. That makes zero sense, right? We don't treat our
look at you like, what?
What are you talking about, right? But that's the same. We can take that silly example, and if we expound that on a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old that we're putting, or a 15-year-old, that we're putting these demands, man, that are way too high on them, it's gonna mess them up. And it may also, and it's going to mess up our relationship. It's going to also, I think, mess up our ability to show them what God is really like, because they might start thinking, man, God's just this demanding authoritarian that expects perfection of me, and if he doesn't get perfection, then he doesn't love me, or I'm not worthy of his love, and it could really jack them up, So yeah, I'm gonna show another example in just a minute, but tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's so many different ways we can go with this, and so I guess I apologize for not doing them systematically. But one thing I thought about, and maybe thinking about older children, but it's a pattern. I think having these standards that are unrealistic and pushing your children to be, whatever, and anything you want to try to put on them, that, hey, you're gonna learn to speak, faster than I want you to learn to speak. You're gonna quit, sucking a passy because you're not a baby anymore. You're 3 years old, so I'm gonna just take that passy away. Whatever it is. If it's you're 14 and you didn't make the the team at basketball, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to make you play every single night. I'm going to make you do the Kobe Bryant. You're going to shoot 1,000 shots, and if you only make 300 of them, then you suck, and I'm going to make you go out and shoot 1,000 more shots. And I see this. I work right now. I'm a general contractor, but I'm working in a sports facility, and so I've seen like a couple in the past few weeks. I've seen a couple of parents that after hours, when we're wrapping up at 5 or 6, they're bringing their kids into this like little training area, and there's just one dad the other week, and I hate to pick on the guy because who knows what the rest of his life is like, but I don't know him, so he'll never know I'm talking about this. But he was so on his kid about he was practicing baseball, like he was. It was. The kid was, I guess I haven't even played baseball, so I don't know a whole lot about it. I know a little bit of the terminology, but like the kid's got the bat back and he's like getting ready. The dad throws the pitch, and something about the way the son was like not stepping into the swing or whatever it was. Like he's going on and on about like, I want you to load up, which I guess means like you tighten your shoulders and you're getting ready, ready to release that swing. And he was like, I want you to load up, but don't release. And like, I was just kind of standing to the side and watching the kid. And the kid like did a little bit of movement with his shoulder. But the long story short, like the kid wasn't doing what the dad wanted. And the dad was like, no, you're not loading up. Like, load up. And the kid's like, does something, didn't do it right. And the dad's like continually saying like, no, you're not loading up, load up. And the kid was like, I am, Dad. And he's like, no, you're not. Like, that's not a load. You know it's not a load. Well, you've been doing this right for years. Why are you suddenly doing it? You're doing it wrong now. You know better.
Yeah.
And it was like this 5-minute thing where the dad was like, if you say you're going to load up and you don't load up again, we're going home. Like, we're done with this. I'm not going to waste my time with you if you can't figure this out. And it was frustrating to me because I'm like, exactly what you were saying. Like, that kid's not helping, not learning anything from that dad. There's no, like, he's not like, this is how you load up and this is what I want you to do. This is what you're doing and this is how you can get better at it. It was very, this is what you're doing. I'm going to just keep saying, stop doing it, stop doing it, stop doing it, and not giving you any alternative. So
that's a perfect example, man.
Yeah, there's like this expectation that a father puts on, and like I say, I hate to pick on this one example of this one guy, but I can do the same thing, maybe not as much when Bonnie's 3, but when she's 5 and I want her to learn to ride a bike or whatever she's doing at that point, if I just keep saying, do this, like ride the bike, balance, and then she goes down and she falls over, and I'm like, balance, why aren't you balancing? Like, I'm not helping her learn to balance by screaming balance, balance, balance over and over again. So
shouldn't you know what that means or how to do it? That's
like,
right.
I'm not showing her what does it mean, like if you're starting to fall, you lean a little bit the other way, or you put an arm out, you put a leg out. Like there's instructions along the way. And if instead your approach is just to over and over again hold you to the standard without helping you reach it, then you're not providing any direction. You're not showing, like we talked about last time, you're not being patient. You're not bearing with them in love. You're just setting a standard, holding them to it, and expecting them to get there from down low, like from starting point. You're expecting them to just jump to the highest level.
Yes. With
no help. And like, that's not the way most humans learn. That's not the way, you and I learn. Like, if you go back and listen to the beginning of this podcast, not that we're like at a higher level, whatever, but if you go back at the beginning, we didn't have nearly as good equipment. We didn't know what we were doing. We expected maybe more of ourselves than we were actually able to do. But if we just both got frustrated and we're like, well, this just sounds terrible, we're just going to quit because we're so frustrated with not being perfect.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here. We would be stuck doing the same thing over and over again. And it would be a waste of our time, a waste of your time to listen. So I think bearing with a child in love means setting realistic expectations and then helping them reach that. And so I've got other examples.
Yeah, I was so this is super embarrassing what I'm about to say, but I was watching Dance Moms the other night.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to stop this podcast.
But here's why: my daughter had shoulder surgery the other day. She's 17. You and I talked about this a minute ago. Got hit on a rebound, ripped her shoulder like way out of socket, tore some stuff in there. Had to go in and repair it Thursday. Today's Saturday. So we're, yesterday she's kind of groggy, right? On medication, laid up on the couch. And she was like, this was not yesterday, this was Thursday. Thursday, the day she had surgery. And she's like, Dad, you care if we watch a little TV? I was like, whatever you want to watch. And she's like, is there a football game on you want to watch? I was like, yes, but you're the one that just had surgery, so whatever you want to watch. So she chose to watch Dance Moms or something. It's something about dance. I don't know if that's the name of the show, but it's about these moms and the drama at this dance studio.
Sounds fun.
This was a train wreck of a show. It was awful. And the people are so mean in there. This lady that owns the studio, like, she's a baller because apparently she wins national dance competitions and blah, 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 and people want to be on the TV show and all stuff. But, man, she is like I'm sorry if this lady ever listens to the show. She's probably not going to. She reminds me of Ursula from Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying about necessarily the way she looks, but the way maybe the way that she acts and how mean she is to these kids. It's like she was finding ways to like nitpick these kids to like tear them down, right? To get them to a point that they would like. I mean, it was almost like she was like you've seen some movie, like she's some like army drill sergeant of like, I'm gonna break these kids down so they respect me and whatever, And you would see her bringing these kids to this point of exasperation, of putting these demands on them that, I would say they seemed like unrealistic. But then her product is great, man, because the kids that stick with it, they're champs, right? And they're whatever. But then my daughter informs me about a couple kids that came through that show in years past that are now like super jacked up. And she's like, well, X, Y, and Z kid and this other girl, they were on this show and now they're like buck wild and they're all into drugs and they're all screwed up and whatever. I'm like, yeah, I can see it. So my point in that is that it was a good reminder about this verse of like, man, like, don't exasperate your kids. Or the KJV says, don't provoke your children to wrath, right? So we don't put these demands on them to the point that they lose it. Man, yeah, you want to see a mess of a how you handle a situation and how you like treat a kid. Watch that show.
Yeah, and another thing I think maybe a longer term concern. But one that I lived and I wouldn't necessarily say this was the exact reason. I'm not trying to say my parents screwed up specifically on this, and that's why I made the decisions I made. But I think having expectations, having standards, just like when we talked about this, most of last episode, we talked about like setting goals, telling your children, like God expects certain things of me as a father and a man and a husband. And so I'm trying to, with his help, fulfill those roles, but also God expects certain things of you as a child, and this is how you fulfill them, and you honor mom and dad. So there's expectations, there's standards that we give our kids and that we should, because a life without standards, without expectation, just leads to tons of things.
Yeah,
but, wasting talent, wasting everything, just a life without purpose and meaning is what it would lead to.
Yeah.
But if you set so many expectations, so many standards, then what you're creating is it's almost like, for people that don't know the Old Testament well, this may not be a great analogy, but it's almost like the old law, the old covenant had somebody in my small group corrected me the other day when I said that. I think there's 616 or something like that laws in Leviticus that the Old Testament Jews had to follow, and I guess I don't know. I don't have any friends that are practicing Jews now, but I'm assuming they still follow most of them. I don't know, but in the Old Testament they had to follow these 600 laws to the T, or else they were sinning and they were condemned and they were not in right relationship with the Lord. And what they had to do was, periodically, they offered sacrifices of multiple different things, some animal sacrifice to God that covered their sins and their failures. And it was a constant thing. That's why they sacrificed every single week, every single month, every single year, because humans aren't perfect and we can barely follow, love God and love your neighbor. Like, we can barely follow that.
Yeah.
So how are we going to follow 600 laws? And so the analogy there, what I'm coming back to is, it is good to set standards for our kids, and let's just say blanket standards. Be loving to people, treat mom and dad with respect, and try your best in everything you do, whether it's trying to get good grades, trying to do well in sports. Like, I don't think it's realistic to say you're going to be the star quarterback regardless of whether you're 6'6", 200 pounds like Trevor Lawrence, or you're 5'6", 112 pounds.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, son, you're going to go out there, you're going to beat out those other kids who are a foot taller than you. Like, that's not a realistic expectation, but setting that standard of you're going to do your best. And I think when you set too many standards, have too much expectation, and then you hammer the kids over and over, like you're talking about, provoking them to wrath, provoking them to anger, or the NIV says, fathers, do not exasperate your children. You're leading to this understanding, this cycle of, these are all the standards. I'm going to run around and try to meet all these standards just to get my dad off my back, or just to, just to for them to be proud of me. So many people have daddy issues, and my dad was never proud of me, or never said he was proud of me, or whatever. And so you try to meet all these standards, and then you fail because you're human and you're not perfect. And I would argue, like, Kobe Bryant and some of the most disciplined athletes out there, you could tell, like, I don't know, I'm not a NBA stat guy, but I know Kobe Bryant didn't shoot 100% from three-point land. He didn't shoot 100% from even free throws.
Yeah.
So, like, Kobe Bryant wasn't perfect, and he practiced to ridiculous amounts every day.
Yeah.
So, like, we can't expect our kids at 3, 10, 15, 25 to be perfect. And when they fail over and over again, and you're still holding them to that standard of perfection, you're coming down on them for, oh, you got a B, you should get A's. And maybe your kid killed herself to get an A, and she got that B, and she should be proud because she did a great job.
That's right. Yeah.
And your standard is perfection, A+. So she's continually disappointed because she thinks she's disappointed your unrealistic standards. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to get to is it leads to legalism, where they only see their value in following these standards and these rules
and performance
and performing exactly the way you want them to. And ultimately, I think, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, that leads to rebellion against those standards, those expectations, the parents that set them, and everything the parents stand for. And I'm not saying that my parents did this. I don't think I would say my parents had unrealistic standards for me, but when I realized, I guess, that I wasn't the son, specifically, I wasn't a Christian, and they thought I was, and I'd been living that life and all that.
Yeah.
I wanted to rebel against that because I didn't want to keep acting like I was a Christian, and I didn't want to admit that I wasn't a Christian and just tell them, like, sorry, I'm not a Christian. I'm going to go live my normal life. Like, I just rebelled from what my parents wanted me to do, from going to church, from not drinking, not partying, like all these things. And I just went and wanted to do everything but what they asked me to do. And so I think finding that place where we're not exasperating our children, but like it says, instead bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord, is just like we said last episode. We're setting expectations. We're telling them this is the hierarchy: God, mom and dad, kids. And then we're having grace in that. We're having patience. We're setting standards and helping them reach those standards.
Dude, that's perfect. And that goes right back into what we talked about last episode about, being completely humble and gentle, patient, bearing with one another in love. We're not, if you're being patient with somebody and bearing with them in love, that is presupposing that there's something that you're having to be patient with them about. Mm-hmm. And again, with our kids, that's probably us being patient with them about them achieving or trying to achieve the standards that we've set. So we're not saying don't set standards, let your kids be a jellyfish and just float along. Okay, it's a great song by Jimmy Buffett about that. We're not saying that at all.
Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, I know, man. Super sad, dude. Super sad. So, we're not saying that. Like, we're saying, no, have standards. Like, God has standards for us, but recognize that that we have to be patient with our kids and bear with them in love as we hold them to those standards. So I love what you said, Will. That was so awesome, man. And we're gonna put a bow on this episode, brother, because that was awesome. So let's remember, do not exasperate our children. Like, do not provoke them to wrath. Let's make sure that we're patient, bearing with one another in love, bearing with them in love as we hold them to the standards that we have set for them, helping them understand, hey, this is who you are, this is who you're achieving to be, and kind of here's your why for that as well. Certainly we'll probably get into some of that on another episode. So thank y'all for joining us today. Again, this is the Lost Boys to Found Fathers podcast. Make sure that you almost said popcast.
Close
that
enough.
is.
Yeah.
I know.
They'll get
Pop.
it.
We're talking
Yeah.
about pop music
Yeah.
or something on here. I did talk about pop culture, right?
That's true.
That stupid show I watched last week. And so check out us on the Instagrams and the Facebooks and Twitters, and also look for my books, Thy Will Be Done, Trusting God in the Midst of Suffering, Pain, or Loss, and Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. Thanks for joining us today. Let's not be lost. Let's be found in Him.